Welcome to the Hair Loss Show. Dr. Russell Knudsen and Dr. Vikram Jayaprakash discuss issues relating to hair loss and the medical and surgical treatment of hair loss in both men and women.
Hi everybody, welcome to episode 26 of the Hair Loss Show. I'm Dr. Russell Knudsen.
And I'm Dr. Vikram Jayaprakash. Today's episode has been requested quite a few times. So we thought we'd add that to the list. It's been a lot of you have commented on it, and we've promised that. So here's today's episode, and it's on derma-rolling.
Okay.
All right. So
why don't you write that up so we can, so people can see what we mean by derma-roller. All right. So derma-roller is a device that you can buy, and it's got, it kind of is self-explanatory. Derm means skin. Rolling means rolling something across the skin. So these are devices that are designed to use little needles that you roll across the skin that actually puncture the skin. Now that sounds horrible, and it's not painless, but there's a logic behind it. It sounds like a torture, really, but in fact there is a logic behind it.
Yeah. So and the same logic is used on a number of different fronts. So, for example, laser therapy, not laser in hair, but if you're doing laser resurfacing of the skin. In essence, what you're doing with the derma rolling is you're making small little punches. You're injuring small little injure points to the skin surface. And in doing so, what happens is there's an increased blood flow to the area, there's an increase in growth factors and inflammatory mediators that come to the area that essentially stimulate the hair in that area to grow.
They stimulate the skin, and hair is part of the skin. So basically it's a controlled injury, superficial injury, to the scalp with the hope that by initiating a healing process, the growth factors won't distinguish between healing the skin and strengthening the hair. So the thing to understand about derma rollers is that it comes at different depths. Okay?
Why is the question. And the answer to that is, there are different people have different dermal thickness, and so you may need a longer needle to cause the same outcome. But also the other flip side of that is
more
injury. But the larger the needle, the more injury caused, the more growth factors and inflammatory markers come to the area. But like you said, the flip side or the dark side of that is the potential for injury there.
Okay. So if people are saying, well, what would be the ideal depth? Well, the short answer is the target area you're trying for in the skin is typically around about between 1 and 1.5 millimeters under the skin, because that's where the stem cells in the bulge area reside, and this is what initiates growth in the hair follicle. So it sends signals to the base of the hair, but it comes from this zone, what we call the bulge, which is around about 1 to 1.5 millimeters.
So I've drawn just a rudimentary sort of picture of a graph.
So it's not down here, it's up here, all right? So ideally, for hair, what you would do is you'd look for something in the 1 millimeter depth range or the 1.5 millimeter depth range, because that means that the injury is in the area where the bulge area and those stem cells reside. Now, if you're doing skin rejuvenation, which is another reason why people use derma rollers for skin rejuvenation, you don't necessarily have to go quite as deep for your skin rejuvenation because you're trying to work on a different part of the skin. But I would argue, yes, they come in needles that are either 0.5 millimeter deep or 1 millimeter deep or 1.5 millimeters deep. I would argue that you certainly don't need anything more than 1.5 millimeters deep, but something in the 1 to 1.5 millimeter range makes sense.
But the risk of that is that the longer the needle, the more likely you damage the hair follicle.
Well, that's why you wouldn't go. See, down here, we're at the 3.5 millimeter mark. You do not want to be down here.
But different people, we don't know where that is. Some people.
Well, we operate on a lot of patients, so it's rare to have somebody with the bulb, if you like.
Sure, down there.
That's at 1.5 millimeters. That's pretty rare.
But you can. One of the things that you can cause with derma rolling is a temporary shed.
Yes.
Because if the needle is here, that's fine. But if you slice through the hair follicle,
not only that, if you put enough inflammatory factors in there,
yes,
then you can shed just as a response to the inflammatory factors. So more is not necessarily better, I guess, is what we're saying here. So this is not something you spend an hour a day doing. I mean, that's really just not a sensible protocol to do, because you're just overdoing it, right? You've got to let the body, it takes 24, 48 hours for all that healing to really kick in. So my advice is you wouldn't want to do this more than 2 or 3 times a week. And you just don't want to overdo it, right? Because you know, if you over-inflame the area, you may be doing more harm than good. So
the next question then is, I mean, do you recommend it as part of your regular routine?
The closest thing that it is to, in the way it works, is PRP, platelet-rich plasma. That's the closest example. And one of the things, we've talked about PRP before and said it's a bit confusing, because one of the things we don't know about PRP is whether the needle going in to inject the PRP is doing more good than the PRP itself that's being injected. Right. So the very fact that we have to inject PRP into the scalp means we're essentially doing a derma-roller process. So I don't rank them at the top end of our treatment chain, because they are mildly invasive, right? We actually are doing something painful. It is penetrating the skin, which, you know, is not going to cause infection. If you've got a clean derma roll, you're not going to cause infection, but you are penetrating the skin. And if you're creating too much bleeding with it, well, you know, you're potentially doing some damage. So I'd say it's a kind of an add-on that we can use for some people once we've tried other things that are less invasive.
So, I mean, I think that's the important thing. We're not against derma-rolling by any stretch of the imagination, but it's not probably the first thing that we would suggest on our armory of management plan of how to manage an individual.
So this sits on the stimulation side of the equation, but we're behind things like minoxidil and laser therapy.
Yes, right. So, yes, so derma-rolling, good, it stimulates the hair, so you know, you can get a good outcome that way. There are risks to it though. You can experience a short-term shedding if you damage the hair follicle in that process, and there's no real way of controlling that or preventing that. It just depends on where you roll the hair.
The thing to remember about people with balding is that the skin is thinning as part of the miniaturization process. Everything in the skin is miniaturizing as part of the balding process. So we know that the depth of skin in the bald areas is not quite the same as healthy skin where we have no hair loss. So we have to be a little bit careful. I know this is a self-initiated treatment, and you can buy these things on the internet, which is absolutely fine, but a little bit's good, too much maybe not.
And last thing I'd say about it is, you know, I do see people who are doing derma rolling, and it's got to be used in the right area as well. So you've got to have an area that has some early miniaturization. If you've got a bald patch, doing all the derma rolling you want is not going to regrow hair.
So that's either at the hairline, for people who've lost their hairline. If you're in an area with no hair, forget it. Remember what we said before, if the hair shrinks to less than 50% of its original shaft thickness, the diameter, then we can't make it a fully healthy hair again. So again, you're looking to put the derma roller through the mildly thinning areas rather than the true bald areas. And as long as you do it carefully, comb your hair with a bit of separation, maybe wet your hair before you do it would be good too, because that does tend to clump the hairs together for you. So do it with your hair wet. Might make it easier to roll through the area so that you're rolling in the one direction, right? Forward, backwards or sideways. I think forward, backwards is easy for most people. And wet your hair beforehand, and don't cause too much bleeding.
Good, so hopefully that answers your questions about derma rolling. Please, if you've enjoyed the videos, carry on watching. Please give us a like and subscribe and forward it on to whoever you feel might benefit. But thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you, guys.